Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and one of the most popular topics on my channel are TV streaming boxes. And I often get people asking me, well, which TV box do you use? And my answer has evolved over time, but right now I am down to two boxes. The Nvidia Shield TV here that I've been using for almost 10 years, and the Apple TV 4K. And in this video, I'll talk about why I use both of these devices. We'll look at a lot of common use cases here and talk about a few enthusiast cases as well. Now, before we get into this, I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that both of these boxes here I paid for with my own funds. All of the opinions you're about to hear are my own. No one is paying for this review, nor has anyone reviewed or approved what you're about to see before it was uploaded. So let's get into it now and see how I'm using TV boxes in 2024. Now, a lot of people ask me, why do you need a streaming box or stick at all if you have a smart television? And the answer is that if your smart TV isn't that old, you're probably fine without having to buy additional hardware. For me, I've got an LG OLED C7 upstairs, a TV that I bought back in 2017. And for the first couple of years, the streaming apps ran great on it. But over time, as LG released new televisions and is supporting their older hardware less and less each year, those apps just don't work as well. They crash constantly. Some services don't even have an app at all for my television. So having additional hardware now is required in order to keep watching TV on my TV unless I want to buy a new one. And although the TV's smart functions are getting a bit older, the television itself still looks spectacular. It is the best TV I have ever owned in my life. I am still very happy with it every time I turn it on. I have no reason to upgrade, which is why now I have both of these boxes attached to it to continue watching television. Now, my intent with this video is to not dive too much into the technical weeds. We're going to look at how I'm using the Apple TV and why I chose this one primarily for most of my streaming. I do want to touch briefly on the Nvidia Shield, though, for enthusiasts. I run a Plex media server in my house where I've got a lot of high-end media that came off of Blu-ray discs. And at the moment, the best way to play that media back, the same way I would be able to do on a disc player, is through the Nvidia Shield, because it supports all the different modes that those discs require for the best experience. And I haven't found something that is as good as this. So if you are someone like me or wants to be like me and have an enthusiast setup in your home theater room, having the Nvidia Shield is still a necessity, even though it is very old hardware. So definitely check out the 2019 edition of the Nvidia Shield. It's a little bit smaller than this one, but it does support all the modes that 4K home theater enthusiasts require, and right now is still really the only game in town. But why don't we move on to the Apple TV and why I'm using this for everything else. Now, the one that I chose is the 128 gigabyte model. I chose it because, first of all, it has more storage than the base model, but this more expensive one has the Ethernet port on it, which I think is the best way to consume streaming media because you have a direct wired connection that is more reliable than Wi-Fi. Now, both of the Apple TV devices, including this one, support Wi-Fi 6, which is, of course, a very good wireless standard, but wired is always better, in my humble opinion, which is why I opted for the more expensive one. One other feature found on the 128 gigabyte version that's not on the 64 gigabyte version is that this one has a Matter server on board for using thread-compatible devices. These are home automation devices like light switches and plugs and other things. You will start seeing this Matter logo on the boxes of those devices. It's becoming a very well-adopted standard across the industry, and that will get a lot of devices integrated into HomeKit, and they can connect through your Apple TV to do it, but only on the 128 gigabyte version. I haven't done much with this yet because I don't own any Matter devices that work, but when that happens, I will certainly come back and do a video about how to integrate everything properly here. But I know a lot of people are buying these specifically for that purpose. Why don't we take a look, though, at why I like Apple TV so much versus some of the other devices that I use. So here we are on the home screen of my Apple TV. And what I love about this is that when I boot this up, I am presented with my family photos and not a bunch of advertising. And this has been one of the big gripes I've had with all of the other TV platforms. Every time you turn them on, you just get hit with all these ads and trailers, and it's hard to find what you're looking for. What I like about Apple here is they have given you the ability to control that. And here I put my photo library in this first position of the apps here, so that when I boot it up, all I see are my family photos and nothing else. And then, of course, I can scroll around. Now, when you get it, you will have Apple apps here front and center. So they do want to kind of steer you in towards their content offerings and subscriptions. But again, you just put your photo library right there, and that is what you will see when you first boot up. So I am quite pleased with that. What I found many times is that my kids and I will sit down to watch something, and we end up spending more time just going through the photo albums here, because this constantly updates the memory section here, and it will play back these fun little movies of your past experiences. So here we visited New York City in 2022. The Met still required you to wear masks inside, so that's why we had that going on. But we went to Central Park, and the kids had a great time visiting the city for the first time, which was really fun. And these will change on a regular basis here, and it curates everything automatically for you from your iPhone photo library or your Apple photo library. So it's always something fun to watch here, and it's your content and not a bunch of pitches for other stuff. And then, of course, you have all your other apps down here. So the interface is just a lot cleaner. Now, admittedly, this integration works so well for me because I do use Apple devices as my daily drivers. I've got an iPhone and a Mac and an iPad, and the Apple ecosystem works quite well for me in that way, and it integrates to the television through the Apple TV just as seamlessly. One other thing I like about it is that if I put my AirPods in here, what will happen is I will generally get prompted to connect the AirPods up right on the home screen here. It doesn't always fire off like right now because I've done this for a couple of takes already. But if I just push the button here, they will show up on the list of available audio devices, and I can connect to them easily for private listening. And then they'll go right back to my phone the next time I put them in. So just a lot of nice integration here. Now you can also set up profiles for different family members, and if you have an Apple Family account, you will have those folks available to you. So if I hold down the button here and I go up to my profile, I can switch to the other people on my family account. What I found with this is that it's a lot easier to connect them than it is on the Google version of this. So I do have a Google Family account as well, and every time I try to connect my daughter up to one of the Google TV devices I have to go in and type her password out manually with the remote. This at least gives you a notification on one of their devices to get them in a lot quicker. So even the family integration here was better. Now, another feature I like is the ability to use your phone as a remote, but a useful remote. So let's say I'm on YouTube here and I go over to the search section, and when I click on that, we get the text field. If I tap on the notification that I just got, I can start typing onto the Apple TV screen here, and I don't have to hunt and peck with the remote. And you'll get this popping up when passwords are requested. And it will also integrate my password manager into that input field. So if I've got a crazy long password, I can just paste it in versus having to go through the remote to punch out 24 different characters. That's pretty useful. Additionally, the remote control can be found inside of your control center here. So if I just tap on that, I can get access to that remote control and fully work through my interface here with just my phone and not even having to use the app. Now I'm going to jump into something I'm watching here on Apple TV, because another thing they just added recently is the ability to see who's starring on the show that you're watching, provided it's supported. So right now I'm looking at For All Mankind, and if I tap on this little eye here, it will actually give me who's appearing in the scene if I click on Insight here. So right now we can see that Kurt Quinn is on this section of the show. But if I fast forward a little further into the episode here where there's more actors and actresses on screen, what will happen is I will get more people here that I can pick through. And if I pick one of them here, I can get some other appearances that person appeared in, and then I can trigger my Apple TV to fire off. Additionally, what it's doing now on the remote control is that if I go over here to Up Next, it'll actually give me some other things to watch, things that I might be watching currently. And in full disclosure, I am not watching Below Deck. My wife is, and she keeps logging in under my account and screwing up my recommendations, but that is my wife's, not mine. But for example, if I wanted to check out the new Bluey minisodes that dropped, this just came out. My kids love Bluey, it knows that, And if I tap on this, it will actually bring me right into Disney Plus and start playing back those episodes. Now, like the other TV box platforms, they try to be your one-stop hub for all of your content and offer universal search, but it's still not quite there. Here's a good example. I'm going to search for Star Trek Prodigy, using, of course, my assistant friend here. And when it pulls up, I've got a landing page here for Star Trek Prodigy. Now, this is available to watch on Netflix, which I have installed on this box and have it logged in, but I don't see the option to watch it on Netflix, only the purchase option from Apple. So you will occasionally run into things that are actually available on one of your streaming services, but are not going to take you there through the Apple search. Now, Apple's TV app also offers cross-platform browsing. Let's take a look at that real quick. If we jump over to it here, what it's going to do is, first of all, give us Apple's content first on their Apple TV Plus service. But if I go on the home screen here, you can see I have options to explore things from a number of other streaming services. But they have to play ball, namely likely paying Apple to get into this screen here. So not everything is going to be available. But what's funny is that on a lot of the other TV boxes, this is their home screen interface, this mishmash of content and advertising, whereas at least on the Apple TV, I can just hit the button here and get back to the photos of my kids and look at things the way that I want to. Now, it goes without saying that the streaming experience here is quite good. All of the apps run very responsively. They support all of the major streaming services, so whatever you're subscribed to is going to be on here. We can jump into Netflix here, for example. This was sitting in the background, but it's got plenty of RAM, so most of your apps will just stay loaded and ready for you. And as you can see here, everything is just super fast and responsive. I can jump around this episode here and have things pick up very, very quickly. So altogether, just from a streaming perspective, it's just a pleasure to use this box. There's never any lag or any kind of performance issues, and all of the protocols that streaming services require are working here. That includes 4K at 60 frames per second, Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos, all the HDR stuff works. It's just a nice box for streaming services. On the enthusiast side, it doesn't support all the things that my Nvidia Shield does for my Plex movies, and that's why I still have two boxes. But if it did support that, I would likely just use the Apple TV exclusively. Now, there are a couple of settings, though, that I suggest you look at for the best experience. And so what I always do on my Apple TVs when I get them is go into the video and audio settings here and set up a couple of things so that we can make sure we get the best experience. The first is to make sure that match content is set to on, and that includes the dynamic range and the frame rate. And the reason why is that typically the Apple TV will lock you into whatever HDR mode your television supports, even if the content isn't in HDR. Additionally, most of the TV shows on the streaming platforms and the movies you watch on the streaming platforms are shot at 24 frames per second. All TVs on the market, at least most of them, have the ability to switch into a 24 frames per second mode called 24p. And those movies will play back the way the directors intend them to play back. And so, if you have match frame rate on, when a piece of 24p content comes on, your TV will switch into that 24p mode, but it doesn't do it by default. So that's why you want to make sure that the match frame rate is set to on. And out of all of the other streaming devices out there, the Apple TV is the best one at enforcing 24p switchovers across all of the apps that I have tested. On the Shield, for example, only a handful actually will switch into 24p mode, but here it will do it for just about everything. Now, gaming is still unfortunately an afterthought on the Apple TV, and I say unfortunately because there's a lot of horsepower under the hood here. This has an Apple A15 chip, which although is not the most current version that they have on their iPhones, it is still very, very capable and very much underutilized on this hardware. So I ran the 3D Mark Wildlife benchmark on another A15 equipped device, the iPad mini, and as you can see there, its score of 10,378 on the regular version of that test and 2,572 on the extreme version far exceed what we get out of the Nvidia Shield. So on paper, this is much more powerful than an Nvidia Shield or the Nintendo Switch, which is running on the same hardware as the Shield, and we could be seeing some really amazing games on this platform, but the developers just aren't there. Apple does have their Apple Arcade subscription service, which now I think is around $7 a month. Unfortunately, most of the games there are mostly ports from the iPhone and don't really offer that console-like experience here. Games like Oceanhorn, which do have a console-like experience, are few and far between. Now, up until recently, Apple did not allow developers to install game emulators through their App Store. That is changing a little bit, and you'll now find emulator collections like RetroArch here that allow you to run old games from Nintendo, Sega, Sony, and many others. And I'm going to load it up here real quick because they've come up with some clever ways for getting the games onto the platform in the first place. So what we've got here on screen right now is a little message telling me how to get a game loaded on. What they have is a little web-based server that I can pop into, and this is actually running on the Apple TV. I'll show you my computer screen here. And if I jump into RetroArch and go over to Downloads, I can click on Upload here and actually get an old arcade game popped into my RetroArch emulator running on the hardware. So you saw that I just copied that file into the download section. And now if I click on OK here and go to Load Content and go over to Downloads, you'll see that file that I just popped in here. And I can go ahead here and load that up, and we'll use the arcade emulator to run it. And now we are running Afterburner on my Apple TV, and I can map my controls here to my controller and start playing the game. So you've got now the ability to play some arcade games and some old console games on here. Unfortunately, although this hardware could run things like the PlayStation 2 and the GameCube, because of the way those emulators run, they are not yet allowing those types of emulators to be installed. So all of the cores that RetroArch has available on the Nvidia Shield are not available on the Apple TV. But still, there's a good amount of support now for a bunch of old consoles and arcade games that you can now run on the Apple TV, and all this stuff runs really, really well. Now, in addition to the restrictions on the more advanced emulators, Apple also restricts file management on the Apple TV. So although we can put our games in here, they're stored in RetroArch's cache area, and the operating system has the ability to jump into that cache area and delete stuff when it needs more storage for an update or something that another app might need to use. So your game could disappear, your save games could disappear, so I would recommend only using this for arcade kind of stuff and other things where a save game file is not important, because every once in a while your stuff might get deleted and you'll have to reload the games onto it. So it's still not an ideal emulation platform, but it is coming along, and I think it's worth mentioning that because in our original review of this, it did not yet have that feature. I am going to be doing a video soon on how I am playing retro games currently. It is not involving the Apple TV here, but a bunch of other stuff that I've been playing with, so stay tuned for that coming up in the near future. So there you go. The Apple TV is my daily driver streaming device at the moment. And although I have owned Apple TVs for as long as they've been in existence, so I can cover them here on the channel, I haven't been using it as my daily driver all that long. It's only been about a year and a half or so, but it's won me over with its 24p support that works almost universally across all of my apps. I love the performance of it. I love the integration with my phone and my photo library and my AirPods, and it's just a great box. It does cost more, but you do get something much more usable, in my opinion, for that price point. And if it only supported a few of the enthusiast things that I need for the Plex server, I'd be using it for everything. So if you are frustrated with your streaming box, take a look at the Apple TV. Even if you aren't dialed into the Apple ecosystem like I am, it is a very good streaming box, the most powerful one on the market, and I would argue probably the best from a user standpoint too. That's going to do it for this one. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.